Well, Mr Speaker, we have an interesting day in the House today because David Parker has put a document on the table. There's our numbers, there's our plan. It's out there 3 months before an election. It's out for scrutiny. The media, the analysts and everybody will pour over it, but the plan is out there. And I've got to say, Bill English, who in this budget projected the $500 million surplus, and we know that that surplus, of course, is balanced against and taken from $500 million out of repair costs in Christchurch. But here's a fact for Bill English. Bill English has never actually achieved a surplus. He's projected one, he's targeted one, he's promised one, but he's never actually delivered one, compared to a government that I was part of and David Parker was part of that didn't deliver one or two or three. They delivered surpluses every year for the 9 years that they were in government. Every year for 9 years that, don't worry, Toe, there'll be a job at the Porriwell pub where you can go back to being a bouncer or something akin to your skill base. But for 9 years every year, the Labor government delivered a surplus. So here's the plan. I say, as David Parker has said, show us the dough, show us the money. There's our plan. It's out there, open, for delivery, for scrutiny, and it stands and it's well because it's a quality document. And what will that do? Well, as David Parker said, we'll actually reduce debt. We'll actually reduce and pay for the debt that this government built up over its last 6 years. And Chester Burrows, of course, talked about, who gets what and who pays the majority of tax, but poor old Chester didn't get the abacus out, didn't add a 3 letters in called GST when he made his spurious calculation. That's the credibility of that economic genius over there. Part of Chester, the tax base, is derived from a thing called GST that you put up, that your government put up after you lied to the people of New Zealand and said you wouldn't. That's a promise that they made, and they lied to the people of New Zealand because they broke that promise. And now Mr Burrows, in his shonky figures, forgets a big chunk of the tax base, and he can't add it in to his calculations. So this gives us, as Mr Parker has said, everything is paid for in this document. Every line item is paid for in this document, plus we achieve a surplus, which in the first year of our government will be the 10th we achieved, added, of course, to the other 9. It'll be number 10. And at the same time, this document puts in place a series of programs around employment, around health and education that backs the battlers in this country, the good entrepreneurs, the people who are trying to get ahead, the people who are struggling out there. They need a decent health system, not the shonky stuff, of course, that the health minister's been exposed on today and yesterday around HBL, the Ponzi scheme that Ms King outlined. People want a decent health system. They want the ability to be trained, and we have a policy for that had been implemented. The dole for apprenticeships that had been implemented 3.5 years ago. We would have 40 or 50,000 young people who would be trade trained, swinging hammers in Canterbury and around the country, and contributing to our rebuild off the dole, paying tax, including GST, Chester, in case you've forgotten, and actually contributing to our economy. Now, we don't know, when we get into government, whether anything will be left after the big tax cut for the big end of town, whether David Parker, as Finance Minister, will be left with economic archaeology, an industrial graveyard in terms of manufacturing from this mob over here. They talked about who they said they backed, but of course they didn't tell you, and they didn't allude to who they have run into the ground. And if you take dairy production away, because another sleight of hand by Stephen Joyce, it is the manufacturing base, which in large part provides a heck of a lot of jobs in this country, that Mr Burrows and his ilk have left and driven into the ground because they don't have a decent monetary policy. Their only monetary policy, of course, is to say, do nothing, everything is fine. I invite Mr Burrows to go back to his constituency in Wanganui and maybe ask some manufacturing exporters, because we have a plan, it's fully costed, It's all paid for. We'll achieve our 10th surplus. We'll back our manufacturers and exporters, and we'll give those on the bottom of the heap a fair go that they have not had for 6 years.
Mr. Speaker.
Only in your head, Chester.
Tim McIntyre.
Mr. Speaker, anybody listening to the previous members